Hello everyone, welcome to Privacy Ninja's Data Protection Podcast Series. It's been a while and I hope the entry into 2021 has been treating you well so far. Okay, special treat for you. Today we have a very special guest. We have Mark Lee with us. Okay, not the Mark Lee, the actor, but Mark Barnabas Lee from Data Protection Pal. Hi Mark.
Hi everybody. This is Mark Barnabas
Hello.
here, your data protection pal. Glad to be
Hi.
here.
And also with me, okay, we have my co-host Dexter Ng, founder and CTO from Anti-Hack. Hi Dex.
Hello, everybody.
Nice background you got there. Are you really in the office, Dexter?
I'm in quarantine, man.
Oh no. Okay. So the agenda of today's podcast will be to talk about the amendments, okay, to the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act. Okay, recently there's been some changes to it. There are even new obligations, right? Very, very scary, even increment of financial penalties. So we're going to have this podcast, very chill session to touch on all these new amendments, topics, changes, right? Hopefully our listeners will be able to learn new insights and gain new information, okay, about the revision to the PDPA. Okay, let's start off first. Okay, there are two new obligations, the data portability obligation and also the mandatory breach notification. Okay, these are just some of the proposed changes to the PDPA. But before all that, I'll just give some context, right? So PDPA stands for the Personal Data Protection Act. Okay, it's an act governing the collection and usage processing of personal data by organizations in Singapore. Again, the PDPA has been in existence since at the start of 2012, 2013, 2014. There have been certain incremental changes and provisions being added. And there was no change all the way to recently last year, whereby in 5th October, these proposed amendments were first read out in Parliament. Second, that was in October, 5th October. Second November, right, these were passed in Parliament, right? And then now we have a certain effected changes. So Mark, I'll let you touch on the first new obligation. So instead of the existing 9, now it's 11. Maybe you can share with us what is this data portability obligation.
Shall we let our listeners know and remind them what the 9 obligations are?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, the 9 obligations of PDPA. In my order, we call it CNPA Prata. So all my students learn this. We Father Go China Eat Prata, consent, notification, purpose, accuracy, protection, retention, access and correction, transfer obligation, transfer limitation obligation, and finally accountability. So these are the 9 obligations that are already in existence before the amendments that was taking effect just on the Monday, really. So the new obligations are data portability and data mandatory notification on breach. These are really to protect you and I, the consumer. And just to add on the purpose of PDPA, not just for companies to comply with PDPA and be accountable for personal data, but really it's really for every single one of us as individuals. And because we know our rights as individuals, and if we are doing a business or work, and then we can then also apply these rights to our customers. So in terms of data portability, it gives us, the consumer, the right or ability to transfer data from one organization to another. For example, if you were a customer of one telco, you could have that telco transfer whatever data you have from this telco to the other telco that you choose to purchase from. Likewise, it also applies for medical data, which again is classified as sensitive data in the GDPR. And because these are essential for treatment, you have the right to then transfer your data, and the organization shouldn't hold it from you, and we hold it from you because it is your data after all. I think that the one concept that I want all listeners to really understand is that personal data is really just like an asset. And perhaps it's something that we cannot grasp because we cannot really hold it like a cell phone or a piece of gold bar, you know. So, but personal data is an asset because people are making money out of this. Don't you think so?
Data mining, identity fraud, financial fraud. Yeah.
Precisely, it's terrible, isn't it? So, you know, if someone calls you and says they're the prime minister of some country, you might get a shock for a little while, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
On the hacker forums, there's a lot of like a Taiwanese government list of government ministers available, their personal details and their house
serious?
address. Yeah, there's
Oh
even
gosh.
China ministers and generals. Their data also available online for sale
All leaked.
in those
Yeah.
hacker forums. Yeah.
And speaking of this data portability obligation, actually it's not something new out there in the world, right? Because if I understand, the GDPR also actually has this way back, the data portability,
Oh
allowing
yes.
you to request an organization who holds your personal data to transfer it to someone else, right? In a
Yeah,
portable format.
certainly. I mean, remember the case of this guy who wanted uh to move to another country and collect all his data out from country A and move all the way to country B. And in fact, GDPR has this obligation, this right to be forgotten. So literally, he can start a new life anew in country B.
Yeah, that's actually true. But under the GDPR, just for our listeners, right? GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's their privacy law in the European Union. Right? So this concerns the EU residents or citizens, and there's an obligation under the GDPR called the right of erasure or right to be forgotten, right? Like Mark mentioned. So you can literally go up to organizations and tell them, I want you to forget me, to delete all the data you have about me. So literally you vanish, right, from their database. In Singapore, we don't have that yet. Do you think, Mark, that this will possibly one of the obligations in future?
Well, I believe that because Singapore is a very cosmopolitan country, I believe there are many organizations that do business with Europe or countries in the European Union. And therefore, these organizations will certainly need to understand GDPR and to some extent apply principles in GDPR in their work. And when I do training for real estate, I always also remind the people in real estate that, if they are dealing with customers who are from EU, and they may be accorded the same rights of GDPR as well. So I think it's very important for us in Singapore to also understand a little bit about GDPR because of our status as a cosmopolitan country where we have so many foreigners in Singapore. So certainly, it's a matter of time. Perhaps PDPC may introduce some of these rules in here as well.
I mean, personally, right? Personally, I feel that Singapore has been, I would say, taken after or referencing after the GDPR, because the GDPR has been around for quite a while. They are quite established, very comprehensive, right? And their financial penalties are also way larger.
Oh
So
yes, 4%.
4%, you must continue, Mark. Earlier, continue 4% of.
Global revenue. Mind you, global revenue.
Yeah.
Go,
And
Yeah.
everyone just do a search on your own. Just search for British Airways and GDPR
Facebook, man.
breach. Oh yes,
Look at
Facebook.
Facebook. Facebook
And
is the biggest already.
oh yeah. Oh, don't forget Marriott Hotel as well.
Yeah. Facebook, I
talking,
think, hit billion dollars instead of millions.
So what is it in Singapore again? In Singapore, the new amendment is so introduced in November and enforced this week. The new amendments for Singapore, it's 10% of revenue. 10% of
annual
Yeah.
gross turnover, yeah.
yes,
Locally lah.
10%, yeah, and 10% of annual gross revenue, or up to $1 million. So they have also raised the bar for the penalties in Singapore.
But let's say your headquarters in Singapore, all revenue comes into Singapore, right? Your regional global presence, right? 10% of your annual gross turnover is no joke.
Yeah,
If
because
you
maybe the revenue in Singapore is a global revenue. That would be scary, isn't it?
Yeah. So Singapore always wants to be the market leader in everything. Even financial penalties, GDPR is 4%, we need 10%, right?
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
It just you gotta give it to our country, isn't it? So
Yeah,
kudos to our regulators.
but I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, you're only afraid and you will be displeased with this high financial penalty clause if you do something wrong or if you're not compliant. So actually, if you are doing everything right, going along your PDPA compliance journey, by right you have nothing to be afraid of.
Precisely. So as long as I believe the organization is accountable, in fact, PDPC mentions a lot about this word called accountability. It's beyond compliance. We talk about being accountable. So that's where I believe PDPC is going towards. So as long as we are accountable to have reasonable collection, use, and disclosure of personal data within our control, I believe the regulators will be fair and reasonable as well. Don't you think so?
Yeah, and it's you can even go to PDPC's website at the header area, click on enforcement decisions. You can see every month the companies, right, the organizations that I wouldn't say being caught, but rather being investigated, and they are either issued warnings or financial penalties. So even if you're a small SMB, right, SME, it doesn't mean necessary you have a data breach and PDPC will come after you and issue you $1 million fine, right? If that's
In
lesser
fact,
than your
PDPC
10%.
functions on, I believe PDPC functions on a complaint-based regime. So I guess if we are responsible for our work and our personal data that we manage, I believe we should be okay. Hopefully.
And you think about it logically, the 10% of annual gross revenue or turnover, it would be more scary for larger or bigger, right, MNCs. Because the
Certainly.
more customers they have, more personal data they collect and use, they better make sure they are accountable, they better make sure they properly secure and use it only for what they say they use it for. If not,
Doesn't that make us feel safer in Singapore?
it does. But as business owners ourselves, yeah, scary. And Dex, what are your views?
Yeah, so like you said, just like what Mark said, don't you think you feel safer in Singapore? I don't feel safer in Singapore because especially with COVID-19, a lot of these SME owners are prioritizing on surviving. They are not going to spend on cybersecurity, or all their funds are in marketing or even trying to do some digital transformation and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and,
I'll
and
call
that's where
this.
and that's where I think the new obligations are really important because they really protect us, the consumer. If you look at the updates from PDPC and the many posters that they have put up recently, it's all about consumer. Consumers have better
Yeah.
control of their data. Consumers have stronger rights over their data. Consumer can do things with their own data. So I believe the PDPC is taking steps to give consumers more control over their data. Just that I think consumers need to know their rights as well.
You're correct, Mark. So thank you for that. And actually, under the PDPA, not only organizations have to comply, right, with the now 11 obligations, but you, okay, you, me, him, or her, we as individuals, as the layman, we actually have our individual rights. So you must know what are your rights. And one of the rights, right, I'll touch on since we're on the topic, is the right of consent withdrawal, right? So we touched on in GDPR, you have your right of erasure. EU resident citizen can go up to an organization and tell them, forget me, delete everything about me. In Singapore, we don't have this yet, but we have our consent withdrawal. That means any prior given consent, you can then tell an organization, right, I no longer give you consent, please stop processing my data. But having said that, this is not equal to forget me, delete everything about me. So organizations, right, don't have to delete everything about you. They'll just keep it to their retention period is hit, right, and then they'll just delete it. So,
That's
but
right.
maybe in the future, PDPC will move towards right of erasure. We never know.
One day, perhaps one day.
We have touched about the data portability, which means organizations can now have a format to send to another organization. But am I safe to also say right, Mark, that organizations are waiting for PDPC's guidance on what kind of format and what are the necessary or minimum data or information that organizations need to, upon request by individuals, send it to another organization?
I'm not sure about the guidelines because these guidelines are just introduced quite recently. So I think many of us are still reading through the amendments. So I wouldn't dare say what's right and what's wrong. But there's one thing I know for sure. That's the obligation about the obligation of mandatory notification of consumers. Again, it's really a protection of consumers that in case of any data breach, the organization will have to inform customers of, especially if potential harm could happen to customers. So again, it's really customer centric. And basically the whole idea of this obligation is if any data is being stolen, breached, or disclosed, unauthorized disclosure, the organization has to inform customers. By the way, have you been breached before, any of you?
So, but we handle breach on a like weekly or even almost every week. We are handling breaches.
Yeah, and I'll just share, right, in our previous podcast also, I did touch upon that. You'll be surprised, right? A lot of businesses, they think that they being in Singapore, they are safe, that ransomware only happens in the US. We can tell you every month, we have at least 2 companies that will come up to us and, tell us they kena ransomware, how to save them, right? Be it trying to decrypt their locked or encrypted files or having to pay off the ransom via Bitcoins. We've all experienced this. So you'll be surprised, hackers, malicious hackers, they don't go after bigger companies as businesses would think. and they don't even need to target you. It's like what Dexter always say, pray and spray method, right? Automated
Yep.
means, right? Viruses just go out there, travel out there. You are a suitable target. Your files are encrypted because of maybe lax password policy or default admin, whatever. Then
Or
that's it.
phishing
Game
sites.
over.
In
Yeah.
fact, I also share my customers. All of us are being attacked every day. So to all listeners, you are being attacked every day. Did you know that?
Yes,
Yeah.
especially if you are using WordPress, you're definitely attacked being every day.
Not just
Yeah.
WordPress, but even emails, right? How many emails do we have in those
Yes,
spam mail that contain phishing sites? Oh gosh.
correct. That's why be careful of using your work emails to register accounts everywhere. So it's better to segregate email accounts so that you don't get being targeted from all
So
those data breaches.
that's
And
where I think
even
cyber is
email
important.
spoofing. Mark, have you heard before of this term email
Oh
spoofing?
yes, email spoofing. It's not uncommon. You know, I think they just replaced the letter with something that looks familiar, isn't it? They call it homographic attacks. I think I have a little podcast
No,
on that as well.
that is phishing. But then for us, is spoofing means we use your real domain and send you. So it's
Oh no,
exactly your domain.
that's
Yeah.
even more evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
literally, right? Because we are the white hat hackers, right? We are here to help businesses identify vulnerabilities, loopholes, or lapses. Quickly get you to patch them up before the bad guys come in.
Okay,
Having said
guys,
that,
for your information, white hackers are people who do it for good. Okay, I'm not a hacker, but these guys here, they are white hackers. They actually do pen tests to help companies check how safe the systems are. So there's white
Yeah.
hackers and black hackers. These guys are white hackers.
White hat
thanks
or
for
black hat.
yeah, thanks for describing the difference. Later people leave the podcast, they say listening to hackers talking.
Yeah. So I have to clarify.
Yeah. So they're actually the white hat and the gray hats, those in between, and the black hats, right? We are the white hats. And then actually email spoofing is with current technology. It's very simple. I just need to have your name card. I know your work email address, right? I can literally like within 3 minutes send out an email from your exact email address to even yourself or even to your colleague or even to myself, right? I can even sabo you and send from your email to your boss saying, boss, tomorrow I quit. I hate the company. Get into trouble. It will come from an exact email address. He replied to it. It really will go back to your inbox. So
Oh
Yeah.
gosh. So
So we
can
have been
cyber hygiene
doing.
prevent this?
Dex, you're saying?
Actually, the cyber hygiene doesn't prevent this because it's the company that needs to protect you. You as an individual, you cannot protect. So it's the person who bought. I mean, the company who bought and owns the domain needs to do the necessary cybersecurity protection on the
So
domain.
cyber hygiene is
Yeah.
just like the first level then. So there has to
Yeah.
be some protection beyond cyber hygiene, isn't it?
Correct.
All right,
It has to
cool.
be a holistic approach. There's no one hand. You take two hands to clap. Yeah.
Right. So let's
After
talk
this
about
call, Mark, if you want us to show you, I can send you an email from your email address if you want.
Holy crap, that sounds really scary. So you guys, you better make sure you get to be their friends, okay? Don't be enemies with them. Thank God I'm good friends with Dexter and Andy.
Oh, it's not only email, so we can also send SMS to you from your wife's phone and call you from your wife's phone also.
Darn. The only thing I know how to do is to go into WhatsApp and check your messages.
Oh, yeah. SMS, right? Even calls from, let's say, even your spouse's number, hackers can easily do it. Can you imagine the disruption if you receive a message from your spouse, right? Saying, hi, babe. It was, I miss you. We had a great dinner last night. But last night, your spouse was at work, what? Something fishy, right? But actually, she was really at work. And the hacker, is the one that used her number to purposely send to you, trying to cause distraught in your family. These are just some of the more
Terrible.
simple ways that they cannot monetize, right? But people can
That's
pay them to do this.
terrible. Let's talk about a data breach that happened recently, shall we?
Yeah, sure. Let's carry on.
So I was just looking at, I think Dexter and I were just looking at some of the recent breaches, and there's one data breach that we want to highlight. I think this is some good information for all our listeners out there, and that's the data breach where we have this food related company who had a breach because their website contained a file, and the file on one of the domains contained personal data, and they received a fine. How much is it? 9,000 fine?
$9,000 issued to the future of cooking.
Oh yes, future cooking. Just because they put up a file, an Excel file on the FTP, and it was, again, although no one really knew it, but it was accessible. So how do we prevent that?
Yeah. So to just give a little bit more context, right? The future of cooking, they operate an e-commerce website hosted by WordPress. Okay. And then
WordPress, great.
yeah, so they retail those kitchen appliance and accessories,
Yep, that's
right?
right.
So then there was a specific URL that was accessible publicly, and
In
then
fact, this lack of protection is not uncommon, isn't it? There are several other breaches that happen that are also similar.
yes, this is not the first case, and unfortunately, we have done a statistic last year on all the breaches, right? What are the different categories? Why companies gonna fine? And we realized that 65 to 70% of it all fall under the protection category.
Exactly.
Obligation.
I
Yeah.
did the same that as well. And yes, in fact, I think it's more than 65%. It's scary, isn't
Yeah.
it? So I
And
guess customers, I mean, organizations really need to protect the data and not
yeah,
overlook
and
these.
actually, a simple Google, you can even list down all the servers that did not do proper directory listing protection. You can even
Wow.
find directory listing on Google itself. Yeah, so the hacker doesn't even need to hack you.
So next podcast,
Yeah.
maybe you can teach us how to do that and check on
Yeah,
our suppliers to make sure our suppliers are compliant, isn't it?
yeah,
And with regards to this future of cooking, right, the breach wasn't related to any data processing activities, but rather to their website redesign. Okay,
Yep.
so so they're the caused by WordPress plugin, right? WordPress is basically a lot of plugins together and you build your website. So because of this plugin, it caused a bug, and then the bug generated a file and uploaded to their directory folder. Even though it's temporary, but it's accessible by anyone in the public if they know that exact URL. So
Exactly.
this could have been prevented, with a pen test before that. So a lot of businesses, they would think, yeah, I'm just a small company, I'm just a WordPress website. I don't need any pen test. But that's where they are so wrong, right? WordPress is one of the, I would say, in fact, the top favorite targets for hackers to go after them. Maybe Dex, you can share a bit more.
yeah. So it's not only about doing pen tests, but it's also about engaging the right developers to do your website as well. So there's a lot of cheap developers out there. A lot of people say like WordPress we just outsource to India lah. So a lot of
Yeah.
Singaporeans try to save money, go and build some $500 website, $1,000 website, end up they get hacked or even defaced. It's because these India companies they do not care about your cybersecurity at all. Their priority is to faster build your website, hand it over to you, collect their money, and then move on to the next customer.
I think the
Yeah.
call also goes out to web developers in Singapore. If you are also doing websites for people, you are not spared
Correct.
the obligations
That's
to
right.
your customer, because as a processor, you could also be enforced under the PDPA. In fact, there's one amendment that came in that kind of worried many people, even us, right? This amendment whereby they said something about mishandling of data by individuals, including employees, could result in a fine of up to $5,000 or even imprisonment or both. So this is one of the new amendments that is not really very clear yet, because partly it's never been enforced. So this is a cause of concern, not just for organizations, but also for DPOs and even for anybody who handles personal data. What do you think? What do you think about this, guys?
So for this, right, I will call it now employee. I always tell my clients, right, your employees now have liability. Prior to this, right, the onerous falls onto the organization. So when a data breach happens, PDBC goes after the organization.
Mm-hmm.
They will say it's mandatory to appoint a DPO. Who is your DPO? Then they'll contact the DPO and ask the DPO to answer a whole series of questions. Right? We have helped clients to reply to PDBC letters, investigations, complaints, etc. So we know the painful, tedious process. So after you prove that you have a DPO, then you have to justify your accountability, right? That we keep mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done
That's
your
right.
DPMP documents, your policies, practices, training, awareness, risk assessment? Risk assessment, one of the components is also pen test on your website if you have one. But now, okay, employees can be, to what I understand, personally held liable if they do not follow the implemented SOPs or the policies that the organization and the DPO has set in place. So I'll just give you a layman example, okay, to help you better understand. For example, if your company, in your company's work, you're required to use a hard disk, right, portable hard disk, to access certain sensitive client information. That the files also have the personal data, right? But maybe one day it's been quite late, you want to rush home, okay? Then by right, the company policy say you cannot bring home, right, the hard disk, but you decide to bring it home just for a day to do OT, work from home. Along the way, you take public transport, you lose the hard disk, someone else picks it up, they
Alas.
access it, that's it, they post it online, the company, right? We call this term GG, right? Good game. So then PDPC will then investigate how did this even happen, right? Last time the company will say, oh, we tell the employee cannot already, you still do, company still kena. Now with this amendment, right, employees can be held liable. I would, right, dare say that if the company is able to show they have done the necessary trainings, right, awareness, each employee knows the SOPs they've signed off, but the employees still never follow. They still, let's say, bring home this hard disk. That's when the law can directly come after the employee. He mishandled the personal data, knowing well he shouldn't. That's my interpretation. Yeah.
So employees, please make sure you do your work properly, understand, and of course, I think the ethos is really to protect personal data as much as possible and not be careless.
And
Yeah.
also, going back to the mandatory breach notification just now, actually we missed out an important point is that organizations now need, right, to within 72 hours of first identifying the breach to already inform the relevant authorities and also the affected individuals.
Yes, mind you, 72 hours, not 3 days. 72 hours from the moment you know of the breach.
We have seen a lot of like companies. I think they like 1 week later then they report after they try to fix the issue.
Oh dear. So that's where we have to be really, really vigilant, I would say, to ensure that we have a way to handle data breaches or at least respond to PDPC now because it is now mandatory. And especially when there's potential harm to customers, and potential harm meaning it could be physical, financial, or loss of certain critical data. So that's where our organization need to have a proper procedure to handle a breach response. So hopefully our listeners take it seriously because it was mentioned previously before the amendment, but now it is made mandatory.
So you also have to then inform affected individuals. So like you keep mentioning at the start, this give individuals, more control. Now, they have more visibility, and in fact, they have to be informed, not only the authorities but the individuals. So can you imagine a data breach happens? You have to inform, let's say, 500, 1,000 people. They each make a complaint, and then,
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's going to be really painful.
Okay, there's also another recent case of the PLS International Services. Do you guys hear about that case?
Oh yeah, PLS.
$5,000 fine.
Yes,
5,000.
5,000. And again, right, we would say after reading through the case study made available online, right, that if doing a proper pen testing would have, identified this. So give a little bit of context. PLS International Services Singapore, right, they provide government to citizen services for the High Commission of India, right, in Singapore for visa consulate services. So again, it's a website or browser-based matter. Again, they're supposed to encrypt their URL, right? To cut short, it's URL, supposed to encrypt it, but then there's issue with the coding, right? So then the URLs can be manipulated to, show you personal data of other individuals. Dex, maybe you want to share a little bit more about this URL manipulation.
Yeah, so there's a lot of actually all these hackers, they have all automated tools to just manipulate. There's even like a word list for them to try against your URL. So they don't even need to try hard to try to hack your website. It's all automated, and the software will actually just run through the whole list, and then if anything that there's result, then they will try to access. That's how easy it is.
So are you
exactly
saying
what the pen tester would do.
So are you saying hackers use automation to hack our websites?
Yeah, definitely. So there's really nothing much for them to do. All they need to do is run scripts, a word list against the URL, and then to try to farm for any kind of hidden URL that you try to hide and see whether there's sensitive data.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like we really need to put in a lot of effort to do our best to protect all our data.
Yeah, because
This is
if you
actually what
realize,
the pen tester do. The pen tester does the same thing. When he does the pen test for your website, he will try to search for any hidden directory, see whether there's anything that is leaking.
yeah, because if you think about it, when you try to mask or because you put authentication on a certain page, right, then the response when you ping that page is going to be different from a page that is invalid. Right? One will tell you need authentication, you don't have access. One will tell you this page doesn't exist. So they know there's something behind here. they'll then try other means to get to that page. So all the tools nowadays, software, they're able to have different attack vectors and methods to then try to bypass or enter these pages. The hacker doesn't manually try himself one by one, right? And like Dexter said, websites, let's say all WordPress, there are software to scan all the WordPress website in the world.
Wow.
Then target all the outdated plugin, take over your admin panel even, and that's it. Yeah.
And
So what?
our favorite search engine, there's a search engine for hackers called Shodan. Have you heard of it before?
Nope, not familiar with the dark arts, you know.
Yeah, so this Shodan, you can search for any IoT device or any kind of web app or database on this search engine. This is what hackers use to search for their targets.
Oh wow! So what I learned today is, while we are automating our business, going digital for all our business, these hackers have already gone digital and automated. So all the
Yes.
more we have to protect and ensure that we are safe. Is that right, guys?
Yes, that's right. Because
Yeah.
it's really so easy, and there's this misconception where, I'm a very small SME. I don't even do online marketing. The hacker won't even know who am I. That is a very big misconception. The hacker doesn't target by company name. They target by your software vulnerability. You didn't update your version. Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Yeah,
how they
so
target.
I really believe SMEs need to level up on this, because more and more I think the awareness of privacy and data protection is really is increasing all over the world, especially with all the recent news about, first of all, this year we had WhatsApp, and then we had Trace Together being able to be accessed by our police, and a huge debate happened just a couple of days back. I think everyone's
Yeah.
very aware of this now. So even
Right.
Singapore, we start to become aware, and all Singaporeans are starting to know PDPA is
It's actually
important.
good. Yeah, I mean, it's actually good that finally people are waking up and being more privacy savvy.
That sounds good for all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think
And
we continue to educate the public as well. I think that's what we have been doing for years now.
Yep. And I'll just jump in also to add on to you guys, right? They mentioned about businesses going digital. So it's always a balance, right? That businesses need to strike between security and ease of access, right? The more security you implement to protect a certain data, let's talk about one piece of data, right? The more security you have, the harder it is to access that data. Maybe you need to have password on your computer. You need to have 2FA to log into your software. You need to then, log into your account to get that piece of data, right? But then if you put less security, it's easier for you to get to that data. But again, hackers also easier for them to access your data. So it's always a balance that you have to decide your budgeting, right? Your security, your ease of access, how sensitive the data is, how frequent you need to access such data.
Certainly.
And this
So
is
that's
when
what.
go ahead.
Yeah, that's why I want to add on the point is that there is definitely a divergence between convenience and security. I think people must realize that life is convenient with the cell phone. Everything is convenient. However, being convenient means less security. So to add on to Andy's point, the more security we have, there maybe do expect a little bit of inconvenience. But then we want more convenience, then we might have to lose a bit of security. So I think businesses have to be very wise. I think I like to use the word wise. That's where practitioners like us come in to assist and be the third eye, be the independent, give the independent suggestions to our business, our stakeholders. That there's a in between where we play between convenience and protection. But of course, there are some instances where you can go together, where it's more convenient and more secure. But I think it's not so cheap lah.
Yeah. So actually, right, to have good cyber hygiene, right, to implement technological solutions to better secure data doesn't mean you have to spend a bomb, That actually, if you bother and if you are able to just take some time to Google, there are certain open source solutions out there, battle tested by the public, even white hacker. And so open source, these are free, or there are even the free versions of software, even antivirus. It's better than not having any. Right, so
Yes.
all this, it doesn't mean you have to spend a bomb. Just have better cyber hygiene, right? Go and find out what you can, if within your budget, what you are limited to, and implement what you can. So,
YouTube is your best friend.
Sorry.
YouTube is your best friend.
Oh yes,
Anything you want
yes.
to search on YouTube.
I
YouTube has
agree.
all kinds of tutorials, step by step.
Well,
Yeah.
if they want a face-to-face class, I have a course that's a cyber hygiene course, a level 1, level 2 course that it's funded by SSG. So you can ping me for more information.
Sure,
Nice.
sure, sure. Yeah,
Mm.
maybe we can put that into the show notes below the
Yeah,
video.
you'll put it in the show notes below.
Okay, and anything else that we can add to, final word of advice for our listeners?
Well, let's just summarize the three key points that we mentioned today. I think first of all, definitely you mentioned that there are two new obligations to the PDPA. So apart from the 9 obligations that we mentioned earlier, consent notification all the way to accountability, there are two new obligations, and that is a mandatory notification upon breach, and the second one is data portability. So these are two new obligations. But the principle behind it, the ethos of it, is really for customer or consumer protection. So if we are dealing with many consumers, we really have to think of our customer first. And I think the second important point for business to note is that there is more stringent enforcement with 10% of annual
Annual
revenue,
gross. Yeah.
isn't it? Versus the previous just fine. So I think with this, it's a really a push factor for companies to really start to do something. That's where I think we need to look at it very seriously. So I think my message for everyone is really please do something today about your data protection practices. Really do something. Even just being educated is the first step. I think you cannot do nothing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and worse, if your company still do not have a DPO, please come talk to us.
Yes, please have a DPO.
If whatever Mark, Dexter, and I are talking today, and it sounds very chim to you, very foreign, very alien, the hell they talking about? Don't even understand a single thing. What is this DPO? Then it already means that you are already in non-compliance to the Personal Data Protection Act, and every month PDPC is, I would say, catching, enforcing, right, and also issuing financial penalties to companies. So just drop us, right, ping us, contact us, and we'll happily share with you, no obligations. Even though there are now 11 obligations of the PDPA, we'll share with you no obligations, right? What you need to do. And if you are
Okay,
happy with what we share, maybe you can take us up for our services.
certainly.
Any last words, Dexter?
No, you all have said everything that I wanted to say.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll end up this session. Okay. To all listeners out there who've been staying with us all the way to now, thank you so much. And we hope that you have learned, right, something from this session and learned about the two new obligations of the PDPA, the new amendments like financial penalty increment, employee liability, etc. And of course, always, right, cyber hygiene tips. So, and with that, we end the call. Thank you so much, Mark and
Yes.
Dexter. And I hope to
Yeah.
host another podcast with you guys again soon.
All right. So
Thank you, everyone.
to view my videos, also you can visit me at Data Protection Pal at YouTube. You
Yeah.
can find my videos there as well. So thank you very much, Andy and
We'll
Dexter.
put that link at the bottom.
Yeah, we'll
we'll
put it in the
put
show
your
notes as
link at the
well.
bottom. Bye bye.
Good day and be safe.